truth is the most convincing story that maps onto reality, and that's why the central narrative is falling apart.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
We must see the central narrative for the fiction that it is. We are Americans.
While elections are sometimes messy, this was a secure election.
The founders began the fight for human liberty and self-governance, and it's up to us to finish the job.
I'll tell you what, we are in a truth emergency right now.
This is the end game.
It's Friday, September 13th, 2024, the 1,332nd day of dystopia. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. A warm welcome and hello to all of you listening through a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can become a paid subscriber for as little as $50 a year or $5 a month. And in doing so, you'll get the ad-free experience. You'll be able to participate in the conversation over on Substack, and you'll be invited to the interactive live stream every Wednesday afternoon. And if you can't or you simply don't want to, continue listening to the podcast for free on Substack, a wide variety of podcast platforms, and of course, Rumble. All I ask is that you share it with your friends. You can find the links to the podcast, the writing, the social media, and the merch site by visiting linktree.com/I'mYourModerator. Anyone who understands the roller coaster we've been on these past few years knows we haven't reached the end yet, and there may still be hard times to come. And as we add $1 trillion to the national debt every 100 days, we could be headed for some shaky financial times. If you're like me, you're figuring out how to diversify and make sure some seeds are planted for whatever may come. And that's one of the many reasons I think Bitcoin is part of our future. But it's not only about money. Bitcoin looks to be a critical part of the next generation of technology, communications, energy, verification, and even national defense. I'd encourage everyone to do their research and do it now. And if you're convinced of the likelihood that Bitcoin is an essential part of our future, then you'll need an on-ramp. I recommend River. River empowers you to grow your portfolio without any unwanted surprises and eliminates third-party custodians, putting you in control of your assets. Open an account with no minimum purchase requirement. You can get your Bitcoin journey started with just $1. Visit partner.river.com/reasonable to create your River account today. That's partner.river.com/reasonable. Now, I know that many of you out there understand the need to diversify assets, or maybe you're looking to protect your retirement savings, but you're not quite there yet on Bitcoin, and you feel better about precious metals. I get that too. I think going in multiple directions is wise, and I do that myself. And when it comes to buying precious metals, you want to be working with a good company, and that's why I've partnered with Goldco. Goldco is a 6-time Inc. 5000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year, and they've helped people like you and me place over $2 billion in gold and silver. And I have gotten silver from Goldco. And right now they're offering my supporters up to $10,000 in bonus silver while supplies last. Don't pass this offer up. Go to reasonablegold.com now. This is your opportunity to protect you and your family from an out-of-control government before it's too late. So don't wait a second longer. Take action today. Click on the link in the podcast notes or go to reasonablegold.com now and get your free gold kit, your free IRA kit. You'll be glad you did. All right, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but there were a couple of Get Trump headlines. That storyline kind of flowing consistently in and out of the central narrative over the last 2 years. Kamala Harris tried to score major points against Donald Trump in the very important debate the other night, running through the list of lawsuits and indictments, accusations and court decisions, trying to paint Donald Trump as a criminal and confirming the underlying truth of the false reality for all of the Trump-deranged standard issue villagers out there. You've been indicted for all these crimes. She accused him of mishandling national security documents. Donald Trump can't be trusted as commander-in-chief, is what she's suggesting, but I would contend Kamala Harris can't be trusted as commander-in-chief because she has spent the last nearly 4 years pretending that a usurper is the commander-in-chief. She tried to assert that Donald Trump was guilty of sexual assault based on a jury deciding in favor of E. Jean Carroll about something that happened potentially 25 years ago. She doesn't know when it happened, and she also doesn't know really what happened. She just knows that the same thing that happened on an episode of Law & Order also happened to her in the dressing room at Bergdorf Goodman. And of course, there was absolutely no evidence that this ever occurred. The jury decided to hashtag believe women, and then that, combined with quote-unquote defamation, led them to decide that Donald Trump now owes $90 million. And that allows Kamala Harris, a person who pretends she is a decent human being, to accuse a man of sexual assault on national television. Trump rightly pointed out that the DOJ had been weaponized against him. The illegitimate Biden administration was leading all of those indictments, and he was either winning those cases or eventually would win on appeal. Trump was calm and dismissive. He didn't look scared. The media and the Trump deranged have spent the last 2 years saying that Trump is scared of going to prison, but he wasn't scared at all. And the facts don't back up their position. So Donald Trump putting that case down on the table, saying to the nation, here it is on the table, contend with this. And then before the week is out, they have these sorts of headlines. Judge narrows election interference case against Trump in Georgia. This from NBC News. The judge overseeing the election interference case against Donald Trump and several co-defendants in Georgia has thrown out 3 counts in the indictment, including 2 counts brought against the former president. The original 41-count indictment accused Trump and several of his allies of a broad scheme to overturn the results of the 2020 election in Georgia, but the case has been stalled for months as an effort to disqualify the top prosecutor remains on appeal. And that's because there was an inappropriate relationship and because they were coordinating with the illegitimate Biden regime. Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee upheld a challenge to the sweeping racketeering charge Thursday, but wrote in his decision that certain counts involving allegations of filing false documents should no longer go forward because they belong in federal, not state court. Because counts 14, 15, and 27 lie beyond this state's jurisdiction and must be quashed, the defendant's motions to dismiss the indictment under the Supremacy Clause are granted in part, McAfee wrote. The challenge to the counts was brought by 2 other defendants, John Eastman and Sean Still, but a lawyer for Trump confirmed that McAfee's decision would also apply to Trump. The case is on hold as Trump and other defendants appeal McAfee's decision not to disqualify Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis. The Georgia Court of Appeals is set to hear arguments on that issue in December. In March, the same judge dismissed 6 other counts in the indictment, including 3 against Trump, because the indictment lacked sufficient detail. However, he said at the time the state could attempt to refile those charges in the future. So the Fani Willis case down in Fulton County is falling apart bit by bit, and it has been the whole time. It has been a farce the entire time. You might remember the day it was released just a little over a year ago. It was posted on the court's website, quote unquote, by mistake, and then taken down because later on that evening, there was a major television event scheduled. She was going to come out and announce these charges in prime time. Someone on the inside, ghosts in the machine somewhere, posted the indictment on the website, creating a false start, and immediately the play they intended to run was known, which means the impact of the info op has been blunted. It can't work because then the major television event seems like a non-event. Everyone knows what's going to be said, and the narrative has already developed past whatever she's about to announce. That was how things started. And immediately Donald Trump's response was, actually, I won that election. I can prove it anytime you like. I'm going to have a press conference and bring out all the evidence of election fraud in Georgia. And he's been threatening that pretty consistently over the last year. He brought it up in the debate with Joe Biden. He offered it again to the ABC moderators the other night. Why don't any of these media figures ever take Donald Trump up on his offer? It would be the greatest television event for all of these media outlets. They would get enormous ratings. Donald Trump is going to sit down with his team and go through the election evidence in front of the nation. I mean, if he doesn't have it, Donald Trump would look like a fool. Why wouldn't every news outlet want to broadcast that? And of course, the answer is because Donald Trump actually has all the evidence. And anyone with half a brain knows that our elections are fake. But the thing is, Donald Trump can still whip that card out anytime. He doesn't need the media's participation. He's offering it to them. Now, that might be very helpful because all of the Trump deranged would be watching that television event. Everyone would be paying attention to the same thing at the same time and forming their beliefs spontaneously, as we just witnessed in the debate the other night. Now, I'm not saying everybody does that. Their belief formation is a product of the authoritative source. They will be handed their beliefs later on, but they will have to reconcile whatever they're handed with what they actually witnessed and what they know inside. And whatever standpoint they're going to take, they're going to have to defend, because the number of the Trump deranged has been dwindling nonstop for 9 years. And it's really a pretty small proportion of the country at this point. So yeah, go ahead. Have your little trial in December and try to prove that Donald Trump was wrong about the stolen 2020 election and the quality of our elections in general. Clearly, we can't know the full lay of the land about what's going to happen in 90 days, but there are certain things we know will happen between now and then. And however much of the country believes that our elections are stolen now, it's going to be a whole lot bigger by the time they attempt to argue the Fani Willis case. That's going to end up being a Super Bowl commercial for corruption. Good luck, commies. Let's keep going. This is Fox News from yesterday. New York appeals court denies Trump request to pause Bragg case after judge moves sentencing until after election. A New York appeals court on Thursday denied former President Trump's request to pause his criminal case stemming from Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's investigation. And of course, that includes Matthew Colangelo from the illegitimate Biden DOJ. These people did not discover that Trump committed grave crimes in all of these locations. These indictments were the product of a years-long effort to figure out some way that Trump broke the law and or change the law to then claim retroactively that Trump broke it. The mainstream media even referred to Bragg's case as resting on a novel legal theory. Basically, he just made it up. Was the case proven? No. The jury was told they don't even need to know what the underlying crime was. You just have to believe that Donald Trump made hush money payments to a porn star that he actually did not have an affair with, which is admitted by both Donald Trump and Stormy Daniels, in order to win an election he had already won. Stormy Daniels now owes Donald Trump hundreds of thousands of dollars. But despite all of this, we are told that Donald Trump could be sent to prison. How will that look, imprisoning Donald Trump after stealing an election? And I know all of this sounds scary. You think about how you might feel on that day or how the country might erupt if that happens. But this is why we understand these things in advance, and we understand that things are actually under control. At no point has Trump seemed remotely nervous. These events will take place for the sake of the narrative. These events are meant to shift the collective consciousness. They exist for the purpose of getting everybody back on the same page. And they do get everybody back on the same page. They just don't do it in the way the regime intends. Everything at this point backfires because they've lost control over the means of information. Kamala Harris took the opportunity the other night to assert that Donald Trump's claims about what was happening in Springfield, Ohio, were so extreme. She tried to bully Donald Trump with the moderators and the television audience she believes is at home watching. Make Donald Trump look ridiculous and extreme for talking about Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio, eating dogs and cats. How does that look 3 days later? It hasn't gotten better for Kamabla. It's gotten better for Donald Trump. Trump's sentencing was set for September 18th, but Merchan granted the former president's request to move that date until late November, November 26th. And it's important to remember that Judge Juan Merchan has a daughter named Lauren Merchan, who runs a Democrat-linked consulting firm whose clients include Kamala Harris, the former Biden-Harris campaign, Adam Schiff, the DNC, and the Democrat Senate Majority PAC. Now, we still might not be at the point where standard issue villagers care about that, but in 2.5 months, when this sentencing happens, after they've seen an election get stolen in broad daylight again, how's it going to look that the judge trying to throw Donald Trump in jail has a daughter who works for Kamabla? It's not a question of whether or not they'll know this and understand this and accept this. They will, just not yet. It's not going to be something they can avoid in late November, though. And by the way, shout out to the regime. There are few things more evil than doing something that divisive 2 days before Thanksgiving. But I'm quite confident we're not going to be the ones looking foolish around the dinner table. It won't take 2 days in late November to blow that story apart. Back to the article. This week, Trump's attorneys, in a letter to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, asked for the case to be paused, arguing that there was not enough time between the court's November 12th presidential immunity ruling and the November 26th sentencing to allow for appeal. That seems pretty important. Bragg's office said a pause would be legally unavailable and unnecessary in the light of the state criminal court's adjournment of the sentencing. They also argued there is time for Trump to appeal the presidential immunity decision before sentencing. Trump's initial sentencing was set for July 11th, just days before the Republican National Convention, where he was set to be formally nominated as the 2024 GOP presidential nominee, but Judge Juan Merchan agreed to delay that until September 18th. Trump requested that the sentencing be moved until after Election Day, citing, quote, naked election interference objectives. And it is pretty naked. Merchan granted that request last week, pushing the sentencing date, if necessary, to November 26th. Trump has appealed the verdict after pleading not guilty to all charges. Trump attorney Todd Blanche said the verdict should be overturned based on the Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity, granting presidents limited immunity for official acts. Judge Merchan will also now make a decision on November 12th on Trump's motion to vacate. In his arguments for the dismissal, Blanche argued that Bragg offered official acts as evidence during the 6-week-long unprecedented criminal trial. Blanche said that included official White House communications with staffers like Hope Hicks, Madeleine Westerhout, and others. So the corrupt prosecutor, Alvin Bragg, used official White House communications as evidence in the trial. All of that evidence would be barred from trial under the Supreme Court's decision on immunity, and therefore a decision reached upon that evidence should be vacated. And as Trump said the other night, it doesn't matter. It's going to be won on appeal. Sooner or later, it'll happen. Donald Trump clearly does not believe he is in any danger because he is not in any danger. So the story will play out as it plays out, and these provocations can just go ignored. And that is what they are. These are events to get everybody back on the same page, the regime page. It's not going to work no matter what they do. Everything they do backfires. It's because they don't control the means of information and they don't have access to the truth. In every case, the truth destroys them. And because they understand that, they have to convince people that what they say is true while not having access to anything true. They have to construct a false reality that is plausible, that continues to map onto the discernible reality prime over time. Now, I don't know if it'll get to this point, but they intend to throw Donald Trump in prison, thinking that people will not want to defend a quote unquote criminal. But instead, that'll just make the country turn further on them. These are the results you achieve when you are stuck in a total inversion within the false reality, as the regime is. They constructed the false reality Their tactics only work in the false reality, and as soon as the false reality is recognized by everyone else, it immediately falls away. They have an illusion of power based on their standing in an abstract power hierarchy. As soon as you realize it is an abstraction, it just disappears. The real power exists only in reality prime. And one more Get Trump piece. DOJ official to appear before Congress over Jack Smith ethics allegations. This is from the Washington Examiner yesterday. The Republican-led House Judiciary Committee asked a Department of Justice official on Thursday to appear before Congress to discuss how the department has addressed allegations of ethical violations against special counsel Jack Smith's office. Committee Chairman Jim Jordan wrote to Jeffrey Ragsdale, the head of the Department of Justice Office of Professional Responsibility, asking to arrange a closed-door interview with Ragsdale by September 26th after the DOJ had been unresponsive to the chairman's previous requests for information on the matter. In reply to our inquiries, the department has declined to provide any substantive information or any meaningful response to give the committee confidence, said Jordan in the statement, that the Office of Professional Responsibility is following its standards. Jordan's interview request comes after the chairman wrote twice to the DOJ seeking information about two prosecutors on Smith's team, Jay Bratt and J.P. Cooney, regarding ethics allegations made against both of them. Jay Bratt was accused of essentially trying to leverage the attorney of Walt Nauta. He noted that the attorney, Stanley Woodward, had an open application for a judgeship, and the implication was that Bratt was going to do something to affect his chances, maybe good, maybe bad. If that's true, it's a severe ethics violation. Cooney, a key figure involved in prosecuting Trump ally Roger Stone for lying to Congress, allegedly said during closed-door discussions about Stone's sentencing in 2020 that top Trump administration officials were giving Stone preferential treatment by recommending a lighter sentence for him. And that was a more minor violation, just unprofessional behavior. The article notes that the interview request from Jordan came the same day Attorney General Merrick Garland took a veiled shot at Republicans for repeatedly bringing attention to longtime career officials in the DOJ, such as Ragsdale, Bratt, and Cooney. Jordan, in particular, has frequently launched public inquiries into various officials' involvement in high-profile and controversial prosecutions. However, Garland argued these were bad faith efforts that caused his employees to receive threats. And once again, Merrick Garland had one of his little press conferences broadcast on mainstream media outlets, including Fox News. Last week, Garland was worried that MAGA extremists were threatening election officials. And today, all of MAGA apparently is threatening Merrick Garland's corrupt Department of Justice. Here's Garland letting his DOJ comrades know that the American people should be doing more to honor them.
These attacks have come in the form of conspiracy theories, dangerous falsehoods, efforts to bully and intimidate career public servants by repeatedly and publicly singling them out, and threats of actual violence. Through your work, you have made clear that the Justice Department will not be intimidated by these attacks. But it is dangerous and outrageous that you have to endure them. It is dangerous to target and intimidate individual employees of this department solely for doing their jobs. And it is outrageous that you have to face these unfounded attacks because you are doing what is right and upholding the rule of law. You deserve better. You deserve gratitude for the noble and difficult work you do. You deserve recognition for the integrity and skill with which you do that work. You deserve to be honored. The work you do every day makes a difference. And the way you do that work makes clear that the public servants of the Department of Justice do not bend to politics and that they will not break under pressure.
Now, if Merrick Garland is some kind of white hat secret agent and he's addressing those comments at the DOJ's good twin rather than the DOJ's evil twin, then maybe one day we will come to agree with Merrick Garland. But until that time, this sounds absolutely dystopian. This is almost cartoonishly evil. I can imagine Merrick Garland making this speech as the lead prosecutor of a thoroughly corrupt government in a comic book superhero movie. This is the sort of thing we're told happens in a third world dictatorship or a banana republic, and here it is in the good old US of A. All right, now let's switch gears. This is the Daily Beast from last night, updated this morning. ABC slams Trump's latest conspiracy theory about debate loss. And this is some grade A propaganda in the Daily Beast. Before we get into it, Donald Trump on Truth Social this morning reposted a post from last night on X, formerly Twitter, from the account Leading Report, which, to be clear, is occasionally kind of suspect. But that is far less important than whether or not the underlying story is true, and it is almost certainly true. So we can remain skeptical about the underlying claim and about the news source, understanding it as information among other information, and just see how things develop. We'll see over the next few days whether or not Leading Report was correct in their reporting. Here's what they posted. Breaking: ABC whistleblower allegedly will release an affidavit claiming the Harris campaign was given sample questions that were, quote, essentially the same questions that were given during the debate, end quote, as well as assurances that Trump would be fact-checked and she would not. So an ABC whistleblower is going to go on the record with a legal affidavit claiming to know that ABC News gave Kamala Harris the debate questions in advance, or potentially a reasonable approximation of those questions, and the promise that Donald Trump would be fact-checked while Kamala Harris would not be. And that is exactly what we saw in the debate the other night. So let's get into this. ABC has denied Vice President Kamala Harris was given any questions ahead of Tuesday's debate, shooting down one of the talking points that right-wingers, including former President Donald Trump, tried to use to explain the former president's much criticized debate performance. Oh, there was a lot of criticism? You should see how much criticism there is for Kamala Harris. It's about a 3-to-1 ratio. Kamala Harris's performance was also much criticized. In fact, it was much more criticized, and over time, Trump's performance will age quite well. Absolutely not. An ABC News spokesperson told the Daily Beast Harris was not given any questions before the debate. Now, why isn't someone more important at ABC News handling something like this? Why is it a nameless spokesperson coming out to refute these claims? By the way, this is a specific claim. Harris was not given any questions before the debate. I suggested in our pre-debate coverage on Badlands Tuesday night, and I think I've talked about it on this podcast before, the preferred uniparty candidate and the uniparty media are on the same team. Quite often, the media is the PR megaphone of the campaign. The idea, therefore, that the media is giving the campaign the questions is a bit of a canard. The campaign is giving the media the questions, and then the media asks the campaign the questions they were given. Rules were made about how the debate was going to go, like the microphones being off, for instance. But while these people are totally dishonest and absolutely evil, they do play to win. They know they're unaccountable for the most part, or always have been at least. So they're going to pull out all the stops. Why would they allow Kamala Harris to go into a debate less prepared than Donald Trump? It's like in the movie Gladiator, where Joaquin Phoenix's character Commodus shivs Russell Crowe's gladiator character Maximus before the big final fight. That same trope was just used in Dune 2 earlier this year. And it's a trope because it's a common occurrence. It's the global regime, their media, their uniparty politicians against Donald Trump and MAGA, the American people. They're not interested in a fair fight. They're attempting to destroy MAGA. This is an information war. Even if they get caught, they still got their television moment. We already saw how this worked in 2016 when Donna Brazile gave the questions to Hillary Clinton so that she would have an advantage over Bernie Sanders. Now, Bernie Sanders has cucked since then. He is a lifelong communist who abandoned his cause for the sake of personal wealth and comfort. He continues to take powerful positions in Washington. His entire career has been off the public dole, not working a day in his adult life in the private economy. And commie's gonna commie, but the lesson ultimately is cemented that people won't punish a candidate for that happening because they are moral relativists and they have already been convinced that Donald Trump is a great evil that must be avoided at all costs. Therefore, anything that prevents that is justified. I mentioned this briefly on Badlands Daily this morning, and in the comments, someone mentioned that they didn't think this was likely because Kamala Harris didn't actually have good answers for the questions. She wasn't specific. And that's a good and thoughtful point. I don't believe it's accurate, but I can't deny the logic. The thing about Kamala Harris being specific is that if she is specific about what they are actually going to do, that would be rejected out of hand. Again, she is just trying to appear popular. She wants to create the perception that it is possible she could defeat Donald Trump in a real election. Therefore, if they are able to steal a fake election, people won't put up as much of a fight because they think maybe she's right. So you don't want to turn anybody off too much. You want to provide generalizations. Again, this is a vibes-based campaign. The important thing for Kamala Harris to do was speak smoothly through her answers, not look like a cackling lunatic, not be switching accents constantly, and not making things too complicated. She was just meant to leave an impression on the impressionable. I think that the vagueness and generality of her answers is a feature, not a bug. And I've talked about this countless times before. The regime needs the censorship and the propaganda because they have a tiny minority and everyone hates what they stand for. Now, layered on top of that, we have the party of false decorum. So people will accept what's on offer from the uniparty because they don't want to affect their social status, their reputation, their ability to earn a living. They've been shown that all of those things will be not only threatened but punished if they support Donald Trump openly and publicly. So therefore, they will just remove themselves from the conversation and let that tiny minority be as loud as they want, representing anyone who isn't publicly pro-Trump. But the positions represented by the uniparty, and particularly the uniparty left, are not popular positions. People don't want price controls. They don't want transgender surgeries for illegal aliens in prison. Trump brought that up about Kamala the other night. It was called a conspiracy theory for 24 hours, and it's no longer a conspiracy theory. They don't want to actually outline their agendas and their plans. And Kamala Harris was not making the case to undecided voters. She was presenting herself as someone who could handle that situation in the limelight and say what she's told to say. She spent her time defending the global regime. The idea that elements of that regime that work together in concert the rest of the time are not working together in concert prior to a big presidential debate is almost impossible to imagine. The network's debate rules stated that, quote, no topics or questions will be shared in advance with campaigns or candidates, end quote. And this is another one of those examples where the regime tells you there are rules to prevent that thing, therefore that thing does not happen. It's like with illegal aliens voting. We already have laws that say illegal aliens are not allowed to vote, therefore they don't vote, therefore our elections are very safe and very secure. The fact that rules are in place does not mean that those rules are not violated. The fact that the rules have to be written in the first place indicates that parties would want to do that thing if they could. Of course, they are setting it up, and we were clued into that prior to the debate starting. Donna Brazile was just about the last face anyone saw from ABC's pre-debate broadcast before they threw it over to the moderators in the venue. That's not a coincidence. The timeline from 2016 to now folded back on itself in 2020, and now we are approaching 2016 again. The story is winding back now. The Clintons are coming into the spotlight, and then it'll be the Obamas and the Bushes and the rest. The news out of Haiti suggests the Clintons are on tap. So, of course, it's the right time for Donna Brazile and the story about Donna Brazile transferring the questions to Hillary Clinton to return to the collective consciousness. The spokesperson also said no aides were in contact with moderators David Muir and Lindsay Davis. Trump aides have attacked the moderators as agents of the Harris campaign following their efforts, which have been almost universally lauded. That's right. This commie from the Daily Beast thinks that the efforts of ABC's moderators were almost universally lauded. That is exactly wrong. This is propaganda, but it may be unwitting on the part of the writer. It's possible that his information bubble is so small and so stupid that he actually thinks people are praising those moderators and they did a good job. Trump tried to lay the groundwork for potential debate shenanigans ahead of the debate that would excuse his performance, speculating on both Truth Social and to Sean Hannity that ABC panelist Donna Brazile, who famously tipped off Hillary Clinton about questions ahead of CNN events in 2016, would share questions with Harris. It came as Trump has repeatedly attacked the network, which he is currently suing as biased. And I hope you can see the intent and the humor in Donald Trump choosing to do a debate on a network he's suing. Will panelist Donna Brazile give the questions to the Marxist candidate like she did for crooked Hillary Clinton? Trump wrote. But the idea that questions were handed over in advance got its first dose of oxygen on Wednesday when Trump told Fox and Friends that he felt Harris was awfully familiar with the questions as he debated her. It was further amplified Thursday by Leading Report, a website that has repeatedly shared misinformation on everything from politicians to networks. Everything from politicians to networks? Wow! It claimed on X, formerly Twitter, that an ABC whistleblower would allegedly release an affidavit that said the Harris campaign was given sample questions in advance and that Harris was given, quote unquote, assurances that only Trump would be fact-checked during Tuesday's debate. A source familiar with the matter dismissed the purported assurances claim as untrue. A source familiar with the matter. You are forced to rely on the honesty and integrity and information of a totally unknown writer for a leftist rag, and understanding that, then you have to rely on the leftist rag. The Daily Beast is essentially just saying, believe us. It seemed to have picked up the claim about the questions from an X account called Black Insurrectionist. The account tweeted on Thursday that they would release the affidavit before the weekend is out. It offered no proof to back up the claim. And so let's go through some of Trump's side on this. September 12th, 12:17 a.m., he posted on Truth Social, "People are just starting to give me credit for having a great debate. The voters and voter polls showed it. But the fake news media wasn't giving the credit that was due. Now they are seeing the results with independent voters, evangelicals, and more, and saying, wow. Remember, I wasn't debating one person, I was debating three. They should fire everybody at ABC Fake News, whose two lightweight anchors have brought disgrace onto the company." I mentioned this post on the podcast yesterday. Trump wrote, "When a prize fighter loses a fight, the first words out of his mouth are, 'I want a rematch.' Polls clearly show that I won the debate against Comrade Kamala Harris, the Democrats' radical left candidate, on Tuesday night, and she immediately called for a second debate. She and Crooked Joe have destroyed our country with millions of criminals and mentally deranged people pouring into the USA, totally unchecked and unvetted, and with inflation bankrupting our middle class. Everyone knows this and all of the other problems caused by Kamala and Joe. It was discussed in great detail during the first debate with Joe and the second debate with Comrade Harris. She was a no-show at the Fox debate and refused to do NBC and CBS. Kamala should focus on what she should have done during the last almost 4-year period. There will be no third debate." In response to this, David Plouffe, the former Obama hack who is now part of the fake Kamala Harris campaign, started calling Trump a chicken and chicken man and apparently trying to start a trend. They have been doing that sort of thing since 2015. You remember when all of them thought it was really funny and clever to say drumpf? These people have convinced themselves that the mainstream narrative about Donald Trump and his ego is true, like he's just destroyed by David Plouffe and a bunch of Kamala Harris supporting communists, calling him a chicken. This makes them look like they are powerful on social media to people who already think they're powerful. So that brings us to today. Donald Trump responded directly to the claim about Kamabla having the questions in advance. He wrote, "People are saying that Comrade Kamala Harris had the questions from fake news ABC. I would say it is very likely. The two so-called quote-unquote anchors were a disgrace to modern-day journalism. David Muir should be ashamed of himself, as should Lindsay Davis, who I never heard of, but both were nasty and rude when they were making statements that they knew were false. As an example, the FBI said they didn't give all the information when coming up with crime stats, making me right. Despite having to debate 3 people, polls firmly state that I won and easily. I felt that also, but no politician should ever do a debate with ABC News. They have proven not worthy. And hopefully an investigation will be done as to whether or not they gave the debate questions to Comrade Kamala, whose best friend is a top ABC executive. If she did give the questions to Kamala, ABC's license should be terminated. Remember, Donna Brazile works for ABC, and she gave the questions to Hillary Clinton. Now, many people by this point have heard that Lindsay Davis, one of the moderators, is a sorority sister of Kamala Harris. They were both members of Alpha Kappa Alpha, which is a historically black sorority. Now, Kamabla was a member of the founding chapter at Howard University. Lindsay Davis was not. And Kamabla is about 13 years older than Lindsay Davis. So they weren't in the same house. They weren't in the same chapter. They didn't go to college together. They weren't besties or anything. But in fraternities and sororities, you're supposed to be loyal through the rest of your life. Now, does that mean that Lindsay Davis and Kamala Harris have an undying commitment to one another? No, but it's not nothing. And again, we saw what happened. So Donna Brazile is involved in the broadcast. She gave the debate questions to Hillary Clinton back in 2016. One of the moderators is Kamala Harris's sorority sister. Even the appearance of collusion or bias should be too great a risk for the media company to ever consider choosing someone like that as a debate moderator. And then, as Trump noted, there's this. From September 5th in the National Pulse, debate hosting ABC News boss is 30-year besties with Kamala and mega donor to Dems. President Donald Trump criticized ABC and its executives during a Fox News town hall with Sean Hannity last night, and that being September 4th, the event that could have been a debate, but Kamala Harris decided not to show up. Asserting that Kamala Harris and network chief Dana Walden have a 30-year-long friendship and whose spouses are also best friends. The New York Times confirmed the allegation last month, reporting the executive Dana Walden first met Kamala Harris in 1994. Their husbands, Matt Walden and Doug Emhoff, have known each other since the 1980s. The Waldens, quote-unquote, extraordinary friends, per the vice president, have donated money to Ms. Harris's political campaigns since at least 2003, when she ran for district attorney in San Francisco. The Willie Brown days. The National Pulse can reveal the Waldens have donated millions to Democrats over the past several election cycles in the United States, giving to Kamala Harris, as well as Gavin Newsom, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, and many more. Her husband's best friend is married to the head of the network, and they're going to get the questions I've already heard, Trump said, adding they're going to get the questions in advance. To a group of donors in 2022, Kamala Harris said, in many ways, Dana and Matt are responsible for my marriage. In July, news outlet Puck even ran the headline, Harris Walden 24, claiming, quote, if there's a Hollywood winner in her ascension, it's probably Dana Walden, the Disney TV chief. Walden and her husband, Matt, go back years with Harris. Along with producer Reggie Hudlin and his wife, Chrisette, they're maybe the closest to Harris and her LA entertainment lawyer husband, Doug Emhoff, according to a couple Dem insiders I polled. And you can find the link to that Puck article in this article from the National Pulse. Such a glaring conflict of interest would usually have repercussions in a hotly contested presidential election. But ABC has swept away the claims, asserting Walden simply has nothing to do with editorial decisions around news. This is despite a press release from 2022 when she took the role, which states, "The Walt Disney Company has named Dana Walden as chairman of Disney General Entertainment Content. It was announced by Bob Chapek, Chief Executive Officer, the Walt Disney Company. In this role, Walden will lead the company's general entertainment content engine that creates original entertainment and news programming for Disney's streaming platforms and its cable and broadcast networks. She will have oversight of ABC Entertainment, ABC News, Disney-branded television, Disney Television Studios, Freeform, FX, Hulu Originals, National Geographic Content, and Onyx Collective." Now, at this point, it can't be proven that Dana Walden directed anyone to give Kamala Harris the questions, but when Donna Brazile is on your broadcast, one of Kamala's sorority sisters is the moderator, and her friend of 30 years, whose husband is best friends with Kamabla's husband, it's impossible to deny the appearance of bias. One would think if ABC News cared about its reputation, it should have done everything possible to avoid any appearance of bias in the actual broadcast, in the actual debate, and instead what we got was the complete opposite. Now, nearly 3 months ago, in the lead up to the debate with Joe Biden, I did an episode of this show called Equal Time, and I talked about how I thought CNN may have already been taken over and that what we would see would be a totally fair debate. They would do everything they could not to present outward bias, because back in the day, that was a critical part of the major television networks retaining their broadcast license. There were rules and laws and standards about this sort of thing. And maybe that was all for show, but all of it has been eradicated since. And of course, now we have the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act, so they could make the entire show propaganda directed by the government, and that would be considered by our corrupt court system as totally legal. But as I've said many times, I think a lot of things have happened that we just don't know have happened yet. And returning to those sorts of standards, I believe, is one of those things that has already happened. Donald Trump is asking for an investigation, and he is stating very clearly that if there was any funny business before that debate, ABC's broadcasting license should be terminated. And you have to wonder what that would mean for Disney and what it would say about the current state of Disney, because these are the sorts of things that Trump says that suggests he already knows where this stuff is headed. And of course he does. It has already happened. It is just playing out and finally coming to light in the public consciousness. Now, speaking of things that I believe have already happened, and speaking of episodes I have already done, on June 14th of this year, I did an episode called Read My Lips, No Taxes. And this was in the wake of Donald Trump announcing that there would be no federal income tax on tips for service industry workers. I suggested at the time that that would be the first step in a process toward totally ending the federal income tax, not only because it is unconstitutional and immoral, but because in the future it wouldn't even be possible. Well, here's Trump in the speech he gave yesterday in Tucson, Arizona.
I'm also announcing that as part of our additional tax cuts, we will end all taxes on overtime. You know what that means? Think of that. Think of that. Think of that. That gives people more of an incentive to work. It gives the companies it's a lot easier to get the people. And, you know, I went to some economists, great ones, and I said, what do you think? They said, it would be unbelievable. You'll get a whole new workforce by doing that. No taxes on overtime. The people who work overtime are among the hardest working citizens in our country. And for too long, no one in Washington has been looking out for them. Those are the people that really work. They're police officers, nurses, factory workers, construction workers, truck drivers, and machine operators. It's time for the working man and woman to finally catch a break, and that's what we're doing, because this is a good one. And I think it's going to be great for the country. So that's why we will be saying that if you're an overtime worker, when you're past 40 hours a week, think of that. Your overtime hours will be tax-free. Okay? Good? You're going to have it, too.
So Trump is going to end the federal income tax on overtime work. This after he has already promised to end taxes on tip income and on Social Security. And you might be thinking, how is that even possible that there are taxes on Social Security? Turns out up to 85% of Social Security benefits can be taxed. That's communism, everybody. You get taxed to access your money that the government already took from you as a tax. Some guy named Joseph Costello, according to Fortune.com, a spokesperson for the Harris campaign, said Trump is, quote, desperate and scrambling and saying whatever it takes to try to trick people into voting for him. It's worth remembering that the fake Kamala Harris campaign has already adopted Trump's promise to eliminate tax on tips. Imagine trying to convince the American people that you were in the right, arguing that their taxes should not be eliminated because the man promising to eliminate them is just doing so to win a fake election. And it's strange, isn't it, that Republicans, the party that opposes taxes and always has never actually just come out and argued against taxes? It's like they were all beholden to the Fed or to the global regime. Because, of course, that's what taxes are. Our taxes are returned to the global regime as payment for them allowing us to borrow their fiat currency, currently branded as the American dollar. We pay our taxes to thank them for letting us use their money. It's really starting to seem like things would be better if we just didn't use their money anymore. And of course, countries representing more than half the world's population and half the world's GDP have already decided to do that. That's the BRICS coalition. Amusingly, the argument that they're pursuing in opposition to Trump's proposal is that it's going to add too much money to the national debt, a national debt that is owned by those same fiat bankers charging us to use their currency, and a debt created by the same fiat bankers implementing their agenda in the United States of America. That's what the government's budget is. Pay all this money to implement the agenda of the people who own the money. That is our foreign occupation. And of course, the politicians sell that agenda to us, and they facilitate the deals so that all of that money can be laundered and redirected to people who are helping to implement the global regime's agenda. Many of those organizations have been involved directly or indirectly with major crimes against America and major crimes against humanity. Just yesterday, we talked about Trump's executive orders imposing certain sanctions on foreign interference in American elections and similar sanctions when it comes to human trafficking, which of course encompasses the global slave trade that works to the benefit of all those transnational corporations tied into the regime's global governing bodies. So what should happen is that all of that money corruptly gained should be extracted from the people who received it, and the incessantly printed money supply should be greatly reduced. And I believe that all of that will be accomplished through drainage and potentially through pinning the dollar to a stable asset, potentially Bitcoin. There's the old adage that if you owe the bank $100,000 and you're not paying it back, you're in trouble. But if you owe the bank $1 billion and you're not paying it back, the bank's in trouble. That's what we have here on a much bigger scale. The bankers and their allies are the ones in trouble. They're not going to get that money back. It's already gone. And Trump is overtly eliminating the ways that they would extract it in the first place. And just as a reminder, this is where the term drainage comes from. It's from Paul Thomas Anderson's film, There Will Be Blood, starring Daniel Day-Lewis and Paul Dano. Daniel Day-Lewis plays a ruthless oil man.
That land has been had. Nothing you can do about it. It's gone. It's had.
If you would just take this lease, Daniel.
Drainage! Drainage, Eli, you boy. Drain dry. I'm so sorry. If you have a milkshake, and I have a milkshake, and I have a straw, there it is. That's a straw, you see. Watching. And my straw reaches across the room and starts to drink your milkshake. I drink your milkshake. I drink it up.
Don't bully me, Daniel.
It seems to me as though that is what is happening, and I think we'll see more evidence of that in the future. So Trump had a big, well-attended, well-received appearance yesterday in Tucson, Arizona, and the fake vice president, as well as the fake vice president's fake vice president, hit the campaign trail themselves. Tim Walz, the communist governor of Minnesota, went to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and there's a clip that went around suggesting that Tim Walz accidentally called Kamala Harris a prostituter rather than a prosecutor. And maybe he did. I don't hear it. It's sort of funny, I guess, but whatever. I found this clip of Walz far more interesting.
And you tell me you had this on your bingo card, and they're eating cats, and they're eating cat. What would you say?
So Tim Walz, this ridiculous communist fool, just a preposterous character, can't stop doing jazz hands, a corrupt nobody who's going to have a hard time in the future based on how he dealt with COVID funds in Minnesota and a range of other issues. He mentions the Haitian cat eaters, and in response, immediately, the crowd in front of him begins chanting back, "Don't eat cats, don't eat cats." Just spontaneously. They didn't know Tim Walz was going to talk about Haitian cat eaters, and within seconds of him doing it, the crowd is chanting, "Don't eat cats, don't eat cats." I would suggest it's not even possible for that to be real. That is not natural human behavior. Now, some of you might know this, but for the people who don't, when you go watch a television production, one of these studio sitcoms, for instance, it's all filmed and recorded on a soundstage. You basically walk into a big warehouse where they have built the set of the sitcom, and the filming is all done in that location. It's not a real house they're filming in, but it's built to look like a real house. It is plausibly passable on television as a real house. Some of these shows have laugh tracks. There won't be people in the audience. There will be recordings of laughter that are used at particular times throughout the episode to let the viewers at home know when the jokes are happening. Alternatively, the sitcom is filmed before a live studio audience. So there are people in that audience watching as things are filmed, and they laugh spontaneously to what they're seeing play out in front of them, and that laughter will serve as the laugh track. But sometimes there are multiple takes. And most of the time, when you think something is funny, it is primarily funny the first time, a little less funny the second, and it starts becoming not funny at all really quickly as you see it over and over again. It's not always the case, but it's often the case. So they might use the audience reaction from the first take as the laugh track on whatever take they end up using visually and broadcasting on television. Now, to make sure that audience is ready to laugh, the studio hires a warm-up comedian, Before the sitcom starts to be filmed, the warm-up comedian serves as an MC. He tells the audience some jokes. He tells the audience about how the television production is going to go. He tells them, feel free to laugh. The laughter's great. It makes the show even better, makes the actors do a better job. And then the warm-up comedians will tell some corny jokes that they tell over and over again. There actually is one of those guys who's really talented. His name is Brody Stevens. He's hilarious. He's just a funny comic. Look him up sometime. But they have the warm-up comedian to let the audience know when to laugh. And then they have a big sign that says applause or silence on it. Now, I am suggesting that if Tim Walz is actually doing this in front of a live audience of real people, then those real people have been coached to react in that way. And there may well be signs there that the audience can see, alerting them as to when they should respond in certain ways. I believe that's what we're hearing in that clip, because you cannot convince me that it is possible for a group of hundreds of people to hear Tim Walz make a totally milquetoast remark about the Haitian cat eaters and have the audience respond, "Don't eat cats, don't eat cats." That clip is like 15 seconds long. It's not possible. Listen again.
And you tell me you had this on your bingo card, and they're eating cats, and they're eating cats. What would you say?
So within 2 or 3 seconds, the entire crowd is chanting, "Don't eat cats"? It's not possible. I would maybe believe it if Tim Walz said that particular phrase once or twice first, but he didn't even do that. That is a totally contrived audience response that maps perfectly onto what we're witnessing, which is a totally contrived fake presidential campaign leading up to a fake election by a fake vice president and a fake vice president's vice president after what should by everyone be considered a coup if any of it was real. But people kind of know it's not real, which is why they don't react the way they normally would. Virtually no one believes Joe Biden's actually serving as president at this point. There is no depth of fakeness to which they will not stoop. We already saw Kamabla going around the country, making herself a parasite of the popularity of various pop music artists, making it seem outwardly as though the crowds there for the concert for the major musical artists are actually there to see Kamala Harris and support her fake presidential campaign. But let's leave weirdo Twinkle Toes Tim Walz and catch up with the fake Vice President Kamabla. She had an event yesterday in North Carolina. And as that event unfolded, video went viral of buses pulling up to the venue and letting off literally thousands of people to attend the Kamabla event. A man named Tony Saruga on X, formerly Twitter, has been analyzing cell phone tracking data to figure out who's actually attending these Kamabla events. And he suggested yesterday on X, formerly Twitter, that somewhere around 4,000 out of the approximately 5,000 reported attendees had been bussed in from Atlanta or Savannah, Georgia. This is something I suggested was happening well over a month ago. There's no way she actually has support anywhere. This entire quote-unquote campaign is about giving her the illusion of popularity, so it is well worth whatever money they have to spend to ship people in from around the country, wherever they're coming from, feed them, house them, and transport them just to go to Kamala Harris events. Let's say she needs 5,000 people in attendance. Each person's round-trip flight is $600. They book a hotel room for 2 nights at $150 a night. There's food and various other expenses, but let's say it's $1,000 a person or $1,200 a person. $1,200 times 5,000 people is $6 million. That is a drop in the bucket for a regime that literally creates the money. The entire campaign is about creating the illusion of popularity and the idea that there are real people out there in the world that actually want Kamala Harris to be president of the United States of America. There is no better campaign money that could possibly be spent than money spent directly to create that image. It is the primary, if not the only goal of the fake Kamala Harris campaign to give Kamala Harris and Tim Walz the illusion of popularity and likability. Of course they're bussing people in. Of course they're sponsoring paid days off for union employees to attend her events. Of course they're coaching the audience of people who are literally there as their employees. Their attendance is being paid for. They may well be getting paid to attend. And of course they would manipulate the audio presentation. Now, here's Kamala Harris screaming about abortion, the vein in her forehead bulging. But listen to this applause line and listen to where the applause dies out. This is a segment with 2 applause lines, and the second one should build on the first. The applause shouldn't disappear as the second one concludes. Listen.
Like the fundamental freedom of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. And we know how we got to this issue, because Donald Trump handpicked 3.
That is almost to the point of being disturbingly fake. Also, gotta say, it's so weird that the line is that Donald Trump handpicked these 3 justices, as though that's not the job of anyone in Donald Trump's position. They use that word because it implies some sort of corruption, something underhanded. But let's listen to this again. It's so unnerving.
About her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. And we know how we got to this issue.
Again, I don't even believe it's possible that is real. And let's listen to another clip.
Heard what he said in the debate. He has no plan to replace it. He said concepts of a plan. Oh, you all watched the debate. Concepts. No actual plan, concepts.
Now, again, she's trying to make Donald Trump look unserious. This is from an exchange in the debate where they were talking about getting rid of Obamacare. Donald Trump said he didn't have a plan about what to replace it with. He had concepts of a plan. And truth be told, that's all he needs. The plan is to get rid of it. The goal is not to lay out all the intricate details of a total government takeover of the country's health care, which is what Obamacare was. It's not going to be a replacement of that with something else like that. The idea is to replace the aspects of that system that don't allow the private market to function. And so Kamabla is attempting to mock him for not having this massive, sprawling, bureaucratic plan about how Obamacare will be replaced. And she uses her black stand-up comic voice to relay that message. Hey, everybody, do you understand? This thing is actually funny. We're making fun of Donald Trump because he doesn't have a plan. He just has concepts of a plan. And we have all kinds of plans. We're planners. We plan everything because what we want is a sprawling, centralized federal government that makes all of the decisions governing every bit of everyone's lives. That's not some kind of hilarious moment. Nothing about that seems spontaneous at all. But if you don't pay attention, then this whole picture combined does deliver the illusion of popularity. And they're expecting people not to pay attention. That's just fine by them. Remember some images. Remember some sound bites. And every day you get 1984's 2 minutes hate against Donald Trump. Remember how much you hate Donald Trump. Remember how much you hate Donald Trump supporters. Kamala Harris. She's the thing you like, not the thing you hate. For people who do not form beliefs on their own based on objective standards, this sort of thing can be very convincing because you want to join with that consensus. You want to conform to the dominant opinion among the party of false decorum. You want to know that what you're believing and what you're saying is already approved of by higher authorities. You won't get in trouble for believing or saying it. In fact, you'll be rewarded. Everything this fake campaign does is an aspect of that same manipulation. There is nothing they won't do. No manipulations are barred. It is faker than we ever could have imagined. And speaking of totally and completely fake, we'll end on this. This is Breitbart from yesterday. And the picture on the article is the rotund Reid Hoffman, a disgusting slob of a man and a billionaire who is credited as founding LinkedIn and is on the board of Microsoft. He is a major donor to uniparty left causes and is all mixed up with Jeffrey Epstein. The headline, Microsoft-backed 2020 election censors reposition themselves as AI deepfake authorities. 2020 election censors, True Media, are repositioning themselves as AI deepfake authorities heading into the 2024 election thanks to backing from tech giant Microsoft. Microsoft is positioning itself as an authority on fighting election-related disinformation caused by AI deepfakes and is lobbying for new regulations in this area. Yet a closer look at its anti-disinformation projects reveal the involvement of extreme Democrat partisans with a track record of pushing political censorship. LinkedIn founder and Microsoft board member Reid Hoffman and Chief Question Officer Trevor Noah, the former host of The Daily Show and a South African national, so not American, are promoting the Microsoft-partnered project True Media, an organization ostensibly focused on curtailing deepfakes, but advised by the same far-left pro-censorship activists behind the now discredited Election Integrity Project, the DHS-linked consortium that played a leading role in censoring Republican speech during the 2020 presidential election. Russell Dye, spokesperson for the House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan, commented, "The House Judiciary Committee and Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government continue to conduct oversight on how and the extent to which the executive branch has coerced or colluded with companies and other intermediaries to censor lawful speech. As part of this oversight, the committee and select subcommittee have examined the risk artificial intelligence poses to free speech and have uncovered how the Biden-Harris administration is already seeking to influence the development of private AI models and is funding the development of AI-powered speech monitoring tools that could enable the mass censorship of American speech. Reports that the censorship industrial complex is seeking to pressure AI companies like they did social media companies is deeply troubling and represents a serious risk to free speech in our country." In an interview with the True Media CEO Oren Etzioni for Microsoft's podcast The Prompt, former Daily Show host Trevor Noah, who was previously exposed for failing to disclose his affiliation with Microsoft when giving softball interviews to the company's execs, Noah calls the 2024 election one of the most consequential elections of all time. Wow, bold insight. Reinforcing the argument for third-party authorities to moderate and regulate the AI space, Etzioni said Americans, quote, "cannot figure this stuff out on their own," end quote. Hoffman linked to the video on X and added that he was excited to see new technologies being created to help detect political deepfakes and ensure that our elections are free and fair, and that is a direct quote. The threats of deepfakes has emerged as a favorite narrative among those pushing for tighter top-down control of online content with familiar rhetoric. According to True Media, quote, "disinformation transmitted virally over social networks has emerged as the Achilles heel of democracy in the 21st century," end quote. True Media's quote-unquote scientific advisory board includes some of the leading lights of the disinformation industrial complex, two of whom were directly involved in the Election Integrity Partnership, and they list Kate Starbird and Jevin West, as well as Renee DiResta and a man named Daryl West, who is a fellow at the left-wing Brookings Institute. And I'm glad that organization came up again because I forgot to mention before that all of the Trump indictments were based on white papers done by Norm Eisen at the Brookings Institute. Just another layer of manipulation and fakery to add to the rest of the absurdity surrounding those Trump indictments. The article continues. After being exposed as quasi-government censors, these experts are now poised to insert themselves at another nexus of censorship and regulation, this time under the pretext of preventing the harms of AI deepfakes. When it comes to disinformation, Hoffman, NOAA, and Microsoft have less than stellar records. As the New York Post recently exposed, the former Daily Show host NOAA has quietly promoted Microsoft's policies and products on his podcast while not disclosing his ties to the company, effectively misleading the public about his impartiality. Reid Hoffman's top political advisor, Dmitry Maylor, has engaged in wild conspiracy theories, suggesting that reporters consider the possibility that Trump's assassination attempt was, quote, encouraged and maybe even staged so Trump could get the photos and benefit from the backlash, end quote, which he described as, quote, a classic Russian tactic, end quote. And it's worth noting, as you may recall from my episode after the Trump assassination event, Reid Hoffman and Peter Thiel got into a shouting match at some billionaire getaway confab in Sun Valley, Idaho, 2 days before the assassination event, where it was reported that Peter Thiel said that Reid Hoffman blew it in funding all of those anti-Trump lawsuits, including the E. Jean Carroll suits. Because the indictments made Trump a martyr, Hoffman responded by saying that he wished he had made Trump an actual martyr. He said that just before the assassination event. This conversation with Thiel was widely reported. How does that happen from a private billionaire confab at a mountain getaway unless someone there wants it to? And it's worth noting that 2 days after the Trump assassination event, Trump announced on Truth Social that J.D. Vance would be the quote-unquote running mate in this fake campaign. J.D. Vance is Peter Thiel's boy. Reid Hoffman is going to have a very hard time in the future. Russiagate hysteria is shared by Microsoft partner NewsGuard, whose co-founder suggested that 2020's Hunter Biden laptop story was a, quote, hoax perpetrated by the Russians, end quote. And in 2017, Hoffman himself admitted to funding fake Twitter accounts with Russian-sounding names and having them follow Republican Senate candidate Roy Moore in what the campaign's own internal reports obtained by the New York Times described as a false flag effort to discredit Moore. So this here is the guy who is reportedly behind Microsoft's efforts through True Media to censor the online conversation and the exposure to deepfakes. You can imagine that being able to censor, quote unquote, deepfakes as determined by elements of the regime would come in pretty handy in the instance where some very powerful people begin to be fully exposed by the posting of actual video evidence of their crimes online. It would be awfully handy for an organization to be there to say, hey, that's a deepfake. That needs to be taken off the internet. But you got to pull out all the stops. That's just where we are. The regime faces an existential crisis. This has to work or they are screwed. No manipulations are barred. All of this is faker than you can imagine. I'll be back on Monday at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic. And Joe Biden will never be president.
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening for free and would like to support the show, the best way to do that is by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can find the info stream over on Telegram at t.me/veryreasonable. The merch site is cancelcouture.com. And for all my other links, you can visit linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon. Down on the range.